So I sort of joined my first assignment from the campus itself, and it was like an institution. That we could bring that conviction in our communication with our prospective customers. You have to communicate at least 6 times a message for it to be completely understood by the recipient.
Hello and welcome to FaceTime with Leaders, a podcast series brought to you by Direcotrs Institute. I'm Priya George, and today we have the distinct pleasure of sitting down with a true visionary in the world of specialty chemicals and business leadership. Our guest today is none other than Mr. Govind Khetan, a seasoned business leader with over 32 years of experience steering innovative ventures across industries such as specialty chemicals, high-performance polymers, paints and coatings, and more. Having worked across geographies in the US, Netherlands, and China, Mr. Khetan has consistently driven growth and operational excellence in complex multicultural environments. In this episode, we'll dive into his fascinating journey, the lessons learned from decades of experience, and his thoughts on the evolving role of corporate governance, innovation, and sustainability in the global business landscape. Govind, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an absolute honor to have you on our show.
Thank you, Priya. Thank you indeed. It's indeed, for me as well, a pleasure and an honor to be on this interactive platform where I can sort of share a bit about what I've been doing so far in my career. And yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure.
The feeling is mutual, Govind. And so let's get right into it. Govind, you've had the remarkable experience of building businesses from the ground up. From setting up legal entities to overseeing operations across multiple countries. So when you think back to those early stages, what were some of the most significant challenges you faced on the professional and personal front, and how did you manage to overcome them? We'd like you to share them with us.
Yeah, Priya. So I sort of graduated in chemical engineering in 1991. That seems a lot of years back. So I sort of joined my first assignment from the campus itself, and it was like an institution. I was at my first company for more than 11 years. It was an Indian multinational company, but I spent a good 11 years in my first job. I believe that's a remarkable achievement in itself. But Priya, what I really learned in that role was value creation. Now, this is something that is not taught to you in universities. This is what you learn on the job. The whole element of creating value, not just for your company, but more importantly, for your customers, for the environment, for all stakeholders. The whole concept of value creation was new to me, and I learned it over a number of years. But when I look back, Priya, that was the most significant learning that I've had in my career in those early days. And I'll give you a small example.
Sure.
Priya, we were in specialty chemicals, and I must first of all confess that I was relatively junior at that time at the start of my career. So whatever we did and whatever we achieved was as part of a much larger team, which was probably more qualified and more experienced than me. But to that extent, the learning also was larger and deeper for myself. So that's something I'm very, very proud of. Now, value creation comes from, and specifically in specialty chemicals, comes from innovation, comes from response to sustainability, comes from customization to customers' needs. And this is what I learned at a very early stage because I started my career actually, you will not believe it, in R&D, in research and development, where we created very, very innovative, technologically superior molecules, which were not being manufactured in India at all till that moment.
Wow.
So I was involved in that R&D. In fact, I was fortunate to have been involved in R&D right at the beginning of my career, where I worked with burettes, pipettes in a chemical lab, trying to synthesize molecules which were really technologically advanced and not being manufactured in India. Did that for a few years.
Right.
Then we scaled up the process to manufacturing. And that is when the challenge came, Priya. What happened was these were molecules which were ahead of their times. So there was no
Right.
Indian market as such for these
Right.
products. So
Right.
we had to, by force, venture out into international markets where we met our challenge, because there were only two other companies in the world which were manufacturing these very, very high performance polymers. These were BASF and Amoco at that time. And these companies were 100 times the size of our companies, had huge marketing budgets and huge presence around the globe. We were a medium-sized Indian company, and we had to sort of surpass that challenge to be able to be successful. It took us a few months, I would say, to realize that we will have to find out our own differentiated value. We would have to believe in our strengths when launching these products in the international market against these formidable competitors. And that's where the journey began of trying to understand our own value. And we did realize the first lesson that I learned, Priya, was that we should be aware of our competition.
Absolutely.
But not intimidated by competition. We should be aware. We should not be worried about competition too much. We have to believe in our own strengths, and we did have our strengths. And I will tell you exactly the strengths that we found. We found that we were probably, because of our R&D background, probably the most knowledgeable about the product. And if we were ourselves most knowledgeable about the product, we could bring that conviction in our communication with our prospective customers, which I think we did very effectively over a period of time. So that was one lesson. The second one was that these large companies around the world probably had this product as one amongst 100 other products.
Many.
While for us, hamare liye to it was bread and butter. So we had that much more focus in trying to make sure that we were successful in launching these products it took us time, and it took us a lot of effort, and it took us a bit of failures as well in the beginning. But eventually, I think we did very, very well. From zero, we brought this business to more than 250 crores, which was amazing. I mean, at the end of it, we were very, very happy. So the point that I want to leave our audience with is that it's important to find that differentiated value that you bring to the table. The people that you have in your company around the table cannot be replicated. That is the differential value. So believe in yourself, believe in your products, believe in your technology, and believe in consultative selling, which we were doing.
Right. Thank you so much for your response. And that sounds like an incredibly challenging, but I'm sure it was a very rewarding experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. It sounds to me like how chefs perfect a single recipe over years, and then finally they arrive at the perfect, mastery to create the recipe. It sounds to me something on those lines. But it's not every day that someone gets the opportunity to navigate those hurdles. You also led teams in diverse and multicultural environments. That has been a hallmark of your career. How did you ensure alignment and effective communication across teams spread across different geographies like the US, Netherlands, and China?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, Priya. And I love talking about this part because that's something I really enjoyed doing. And to be honest, that's also the part where I learned a lot. And there were, of course, some missteps, and I would not claim that everything went well. Now, it's a question of understanding people. It's a question of having empathy. Different cultures, different people, different nationalities, they think differently. They
Absolutely.
perceive things differently. Most importantly, they have different ways of communicating, both the stated communication and the unstated communication.
Unstated.
So the body
Yes.
language is different. So for me, it was challenging. I had no previous learning or training to be able to do it. But I think what is important is to, especially when you have different nationalities forming your team, and
Right.
each person's contribution is
Mm.
important to the success. You have to make sure that they have a shared objective. The
Absolutely.
role of a leader, to my mind, is to make sure that that shared objective is communicated to the entire team to bring clarity and alignment. These are very powerful phrases, in my view. Clarity and alignment. Once the clarity for the shared objective is there, then people automatically begin to align themselves.
Mm.
This is, as you know, easier said than done in a complex environment. So let me take an example of
Sure.
two nationalities which are extremely different, both in terms of their history, heritage, culture, which actually sort of governs the way they behave, governs the way they perceive, governs the way they react to the same situation.
Yes.
And I had the pleasure of leading a multicultural team, which had, on the one hand, a couple of people from the Netherlands, and on the other hand, people from China, a couple of colleagues from China. Now, these two cultures can be as different as they can be.
Chalk and cheese.
You probably would know the Dutch, the people from the Netherlands, are extremely direct. They are painfully direct. They do not believe in hierarchies. If it's the CEO or the stenographer, they would still call each other by their first names, and with no adjectives at all. On the other hand, you have the Chinese, great people, but their way of communicating is very, very indirect, quite hierarchical. Now to get both these guys to still contribute to the team's success is an education by itself. So what you typically, or what I tried to do, and it, at least in hindsight, proved to be effective, was to communicate, communicate, and communicate. There's nothing like over communication, but under communication can be very, very risky to your objectives. So you have to keep, one of my bosses used to tell me, Govind, you have to communicate at least 6 times a message for it to be completely understood by the recipient, especially in these multicultural organizations. It wasn't easy. It got quite boring at times as well, but you have to keep reinforcing the message again and again and again. Now, how do you get these guys to talk to each other? That's the important thing, of course. You can have individual approaches to make them understand, but if they have to work together, if they have to collaborate, how do you make them to talk to each other? The one thing that I tried, and of course, the easier part is to put them into informal settings, where over a dinner or even over a beer, they can talk about their own lives and cultures, etc. That's a very effective one. But another effective way is to put them into teams, into small teams, where they have no option but to try and manage their differences of perception. Now, and the even more important part is for myself as a leader or anyone as a leader to get the hell out of their working. Make sure that they are left to their means where they have no other option but to communicate, but to collaborate, but to find ways of convergence so that they can understand each other's language, their body movements, and try and perceive their perceptions and try and make peace with it. Now that
like a sink or swim situation.
It's like a sink or swim situation where you have to gradually observe them, but keep away from the scene. So they don't, every time look at you.
Yeah, like a mediator.
Yeah,
Right.
and they know that we have to live together. So that proved very effective, but it was very enjoyable. And I think personally, I learned a lot from these interactions with individuals, with colleagues from different countries. I would have worked in my 3 decades of career with colleagues from more than 40 nations, 40 different nations. So yeah, just trying to understand, learn what drives them, what inspires them, their holidaying effort habits, their families, their cultures was such an enriching experience, Priya.
Right, right. Thank you, Govind, for sharing such insightful anecdotes. And it's not every day you hear about someone managing such complex multi-country operations. Which leads me to my next question, Govind, is you've played a pivotal role in setting up manufacturing and customer fulfillment teams, not just in India, but also in the Middle East, which in itself is a huge accomplishment. Could you take us back to those early days and walk us through the initial steps you took to build these operations from ground up? If you could narrate some key moments or decisions that really shaped the success of these ventures.
Thanks, Priya. So, Priya, I like to build. I always call myself as an engineer who likes to build. I like to build from scratch. And luckily for me, I'm very fortunate that in my 3 decades of professional experience, I had multiple opportunities where I had to go back to scratch and start, at times, go back to my home office and start to build office spaces, build teams, build R&D facilities, build manufacturing facilities, build contract, build end user relationships, marketing teams, supply chains. I did that multiple times in my career, at least 3 distinct times where I had to start from scratch and build. And I actually love that process. The advantage of building from scratch is that you can bring in all your ideas, thoughts, experiences, learnings into play. And that's what I loved to do every time I was required to build again. Now, and I have built for multinational companies around the world who did not have a presence in India. India is extremely unique, Priya, and we all know it very well. The whole
Yes.
thought processes, the markets, the customer aspirations, the demands are very, the price consciousness of Indian customers, extremely, they're very value conscious. So
Right.
as a business leader, one has to be aware to make sure that global products, global solutions may not necessarily immediately fit into Indian conditions and in the Indian markets. So the essence of what I did was to make sure that we could localize global products, global solutions to make them valuable for Indian customers, Indian industry. And that's what happened over a period of time. There were a lot of learnings involved. And again, I'm sure there were a few missteps as well. But each misstep was an opportunity to learn and do better. So this happened in India, where multiple times built manufacturing facilities for global products and solutions. Another important factor here is the whole need for indigenization to make sure that global products were tailored to meet the needs of local communities, local customers, and industries. So my emphasis always was to make sure that these global companies also invested in research and development facilities, application development facilities in India. These specialty chemicals that I've been involved with all the time are very, very special. They are unlike mass produced chemicals or commodity chemicals. These chemicals sell on the value they bring to the customer's processes, on the value that they add to the customer's products. So it's very important to understand the entire value chain, not just the business of your customer, but your customer's customer and your customer's customer's customer, right up to the end consumer, and make sure that you understand clearly the value that your product brings to the products of your customer and in the value chain. So that is extremely important. which I always tried to build during my career for all these overseas multinational companies. You asked me about the Middle East. That's very
Right.
interesting. It's a very different market. It's a different market in one way, and it's also very similar to the Indian market in another way. And there's a reason, there's a cultural reason for that. In the GCC countries, in the 9 GCC countries in the Middle East, you would find that the business owners are typically from that country, from the Middle East, the sheikhs, but practically all the technical people, the purchasing people, the shop floor people are either Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, but from
Bangladeshis,
the South
yes.
Asian region. So
Correct.
there's a immediate connect with the people that you actually deal with, especially for specialty. This is very true for specialty chemicals, where you have to have consultative selling. You have to talk about the product's features, the product's attributes, and how it makes a difference to the customer's processes. And that is best done in your own language. And luckily, in the Middle East region, the people who are on the shop floor, the technicians, they understand your language, they understand your body language. And more importantly, you understand their body language. And if they're beginning to understand what you are trying to tell them, it's very evident in their body language. So that helps a lot. That helped me a lot to expand operations from India to the Middle East. Typically, multinational companies these days have their Indian headquarters managing the Middle East and, in fact, countries as far as North Africa as well, where again the same cultural attributes come into play. So I had a lot of fun managing India, South Asia, Middle East, North Africa from the headquarters in Delhi or Mumbai.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your response and for articulating your experience for our viewers and our listeners. Which leads me to my next question, Govind. What are some of the key trends you're seeing emerge in the industry today? And how do you think these trends will shape the future of innovation and business growth, especially in regions like India and the Middle East?
Sure. So I'll try to answer this question at two different levels.
Sure.
At the first level is the demand supply sort of dynamics for specialty chemicals. As you probably know, Priya, specialty chemicals market for specialty chemicals is expanding at a very, very rapid pace. Let's say over the last decade or so, across the world, but more specifically in regions in India, China, Middle East, and so many. And the reasons are many, but the primary reasons are the primary reason is the aspiration level of customers in the region. As they get more money into their pockets, customers in our region want and aspire for better performing products across industries. So be it in agriculture, be it in cosmetics, be in lifestyle products, be in furniture products, all these places where specialty chemicals are used have grown exponentially because of the rising aspiration levels of people in these areas. That is one. The second is the rapid urbanization. We see a lot of people moving from the villages to towns and cities.
They're migrating, yes.
They are migrating. So you see people aspiring for better lives, better homes, better facilities for themselves and for their families. That also leads to growth in specialty chemicals. And third, of course, is the miniaturization. I mean, if you look at your mobile phones, that probably your first mobile phone, Priya, it would have probably been 4 times heavier than the mobile phone and the smartphone that you carry today. So your laptops have got thinner. Your television sets. You remember those old TV sets that we grew up with, those boxes that we grew up with? The miniaturization. Miniaturization entails the use of higher performing products, higher performing plastics that go to construct them so that they can give the same or better performance in a limited space, in a relatively limited space. All this is becoming possible due to the specialty chemicals, high performance polymers that have been invented, discovered, fine-tuned, and so on and so forth. So I see a glorious future for specialty chemicals in the decades to come. That is the first part.
Right.
And the second part, and which is actually closer to my heart, is the whole concept of sustainability. Now, this did not come to me automatically, to be honest, not from the beginning for sure. But this was at a conference that I attended on climate change, which sort of was a turning point in my life and my career and in my understanding. We all know that the globe is getting warmer.
Yes.
We know that it has gone up, the global surface temperature has gone up by close to 1.5 degrees centigrade already in the last century. And there is a good chance that it would go up by another 1.5 to 2 degrees centigrade by the turn of this century. Now, this is alarming. This is a situation that we have created for ourselves. At least I hold my generation and the previous generation responsible, but we owe it to our next generations to make sure that they do not face the difficulties that we have created in our generation. They do still have access to minerals that we have been indiscriminately using while making our products. That puts a lot of responsibility on professionals in the specialty chemicals industry. The specialty chemicals industry, by definition, actually borders on hazardous chemicals, borders on processes that consume a lot of energy, borders on processes that consume a lot of water, consumes a lot of natural resources. So responsibility on the specialty chemicals industry is even more as far as the sustainability issues are concerned, the ESG issues are concerned, the climate change issues are concerned, the carbon issues are concerned. This realization, Priya, sort of changed my whole perspective from absolute profitability related thinking processes to profitability combined with sustainability. I think this is a mindset change. We all are responsible and we all have a duty to the next generations to make sure that we embrace the concepts of waste reduction, circular economy, sustainability, environment, carbon footprint, global warming, and make sure that we do not just talk about these issues, but actually have plans, action-oriented, time-bound plans to make sure that we can mitigate the harmful effects that the chemical industry can potentially have on the environment. So these are, as I said, one is the rapid growth that I envisage. And the second is the whole focus on sustainability.
Right.
And it's not just individuals who need to change the way they do things. I think companies of the future, businesses of the future will be forced by their investors to put more and more emphasis, resources, action plans on sustainability. And even more importantly, the customers of the future, our children, our grandchildren, would insist, I believe, on making sure that they buy products and specify products where the companies that make them have a commitment to sustainability, have a commitment to reducing greenhouse gases. Now, these aspects, these trends will force companies of the future to put in resources and plans to mitigate the harmful effects that their business processes, their production processes bring to the environment.
You were talking about at the start of the interview, you mentioned a particular polymer, a molecule that you were working on. Would you be able to tell us which sector were you, making it for, designing that molecule or the polymer for?
Yeah. The polymer that we were designing at the start of my career is largely used. It is used over a lot of applications in a lot of sectors in different industries. But the one that I would really sort of focus on is the one that was being used in the electronics industry. I talked to you about miniaturization.
Right.
So this polymer was used in making the chip trays that are used to bake semiconductors that are
Got it.
used in your mobile phones, in your
Right.
laptop, in
Pieces,
your
everything.
batteries,
Yeah.
and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. So extremely important, extremely high performance, extremely temperature resistant, and extremely light in weight.
So when you talk about miniaturization, um, we also have heard about, since you also talked about sustainability, um, we hear we hear a lot about microplastics these days, right? And in my knowledge, microplastics are when a piece of plastic gets degraded over a period of time till there's a lot of wear and tear, and finally it comes to a size so small uh, where it cannot be broken down further, right? Which could
Yeah,
be ingested.
sure.
So when you talk about miniaturization, but there's also a problem of, correct me if I'm wrong, again, they could be completely different things, because the moment you talk about miniaturizations, the first thing that came to my mind is microplastics, so are they like um, in any way connected or completely different? Like, could you?
Well, I'm afraid they are not connected, Priya.
Okay,
See, the important thing in miniaturization, it actually helps in a multitude of ways. The most important aspect is the ability to build in higher and higher performance in a
got it,
limited space. The
got
other,
it.
of course, is reducing the weight, reducing the amount of metal
Yeah,
that
you're
is used
using
by
lesser
replacing it
resources.
with materials that a lot more bring in a lot of more
Yes,
functionality.
got it, got it.
The other part that you mentioned was the whole issue of plastic waste being ingested as microplastics. Now, the chemical industry, the polymer industry is largely now, especially the larger players in this market, use the approach of cradle to grave to make sure that there is a circular economy which either recycles, reuses, or sort of makes the plastic go away from the environment to very
Not
known
single
ways of,
use.
yeah, recycling and reuse are extremely important. These companies make sure that whatever they produce, it's like the cradle, and where it ends up is like the grave. And they make sure that they have programs, policies, projects, which make sure that they take ownership of the materials from the beginning till the end. And I think that's a very good amount of awakening and also technology that has come into this area, which enables uh, making sure that nothing ends up in landfills or for incineration. There are
Right.
the challenge is not gone, but I do believe that the technological advances in this area are
Yeah.
sufficient to make sure that these plastics are taken care of. The other part I would like to sort of allude to is the whole concept of using biodegradable plastics and producing plastics from natural sources, from renewable sources, so that you do not end up with this problem of microplastics ending up in waste.
Right. Right. Thank you. Thank you so much for clearing that for me, Govind. Now, it's clear from our conversation so far that you've already accomplished so much in your career. But as someone who thrives on innovation and growth, what exciting goals or aspirations do you have for the future, both for yourself and the industry that you're shaping?
Well, Priya, I believe I've just started. So, although I have 3 decades of professional experience behind me, but I think in the journey of sustainability, environment, corporate governance, I believe I have just started, and I think I owe it to myself, having had this long experience, to make sure that I assist my colleagues in the industry the next generations, all the different startups that are coming up in the specialty chemical industry, to make sure that I can pass on some of this knowledge, some of this experience, some of these learnings to them right at the start of their enterprises, to make sure that these values of environment, sustainability, governance, social factors are built into the business plans of entrepreneurs, of startups. So
So like
that's
a mentor
like a
in a
mentor,
mentorship role.
like a coach, like an advisor, like a friendly advisor, making
Hmm.
sure that these aspects are, I can tell you, Priya, it's much easier and much simpler to design these aspects right at the beginning rather than trying to incorporate these aspects at a later stage in the business cycle. So I would love
Hmm.
to see Indian entrepreneurs making sure when they plan their enterprises, imbibe some of these considerations into their thinking process, into their DNA, so that the future generations make
Yes.
sure that they respect, but also commercially reward these industries which exhibit their commitment to the environment.
Right. And I'm sure it must be very gratifying for you also to be sharing your learnings and experiences with the next generation. So that's a lovely thought. You've also briefly in your previous responses, we've touched upon the growing importance of ESG principles and corporate governance. So very briefly, do you have anything more to add in like what ways do you plan to integrate uh, the ESG principles into your, or corporate governance for that matter, into your work to stay ahead in an ever evolving industry?
So I do believe that environment, social, and governance factors and the commitment to these important salient features will separate the successful companies of the future from the not so successful companies. I don't see that these concepts have become ingrained or are as well understood as they ought to be. And I would be very keen to try and distill these concepts, make them simple to understand, simple to grasp, and most importantly, simple to act upon for companies. A lot of smaller companies struggle to really understand what they need to do. What are the sustainability goals? How do you measure them? How do you benchmark them? How do you, I mean, it's a slow process. The journey of sustainability and achieving sustainability goals is a relatively slow process. It has to be monitored, it has to be evaluated at every, and there are scientific ways of doing it. And I would love to provide these scientific ways that I have learned myself in my professional career to these newer companies who still have to begin their sustainability journey or would like to begin their sustainability journey. That's the part on sustainability. The part on governance, extremely important. I think we live, Priya, in an era now where practically everything is transparent. Because of digitalization, because of artificial intelligence, there's no place to hide. We at our hearts have to make sure that we follow good corporate governance, not just for ourselves, but for the sake of our employees, for the sake of our customers, our
Yes.
shareholders, and for the larger society. I think it's important to embrace the principles of corporate governance, build it into your value systems, build into the company's culture, and it all starts at the top. The principles of corporate governance are best exhibited by the top management of the company, and it automatically percolates down to the employees of the company. And they begin to build and begin to be proud of their own organization, both in terms of sustainability and corporate governance. That's my effort for the next couple of decades, to make sure that I invest my time and my experience and knowledge in trying to build those successful companies in India, which would be committed to ESG and corporate governance.
Right. Your passion for, I think, the environment and the ESG principles, I think, really comes through in this conversation. And thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Govind, you recently enrolled with Directors Institute. Could you share what motivated you to take this step and how you found your experience with the Institute so far? Like, how do you think the knowledge and skills gained here will influence your approach to leadership and decision-making moving forward?
No, I was actually very impressed with the work that Directors Institute does. The kind of courses that Directors Institute runs. I think they are extremely powerful tools to bring about the change and the awakening that is required in these very specific areas of ESG and governance. This is not an individual journey, Priya. I think companies, directors, top managements, boards of various companies need to come on a platform where they can exchange ideas, thoughts, experiences in these very, very critical areas. And I think Directors Institute does exactly that. It provides that platform for senior managements, advisors to come together, exchange ideas, exchange their thought processes, successes and failures, to make sure that they all contribute in a nice, enhanced, congruent way to the growth of the Indian industry and, in fact, the global industry as well. I feel very proud to be associated with Directors Institute.
Thank you. Thank you for those encouraging words. And above all, thank you for an inspiring conversation peppered with all these lovely anecdotes. And thank you for sharing that with us. Yes. And with that, we come to the close of today's very fascinating conversation. Govind, it's been nothing short of inspiring to hear about your incredible journey, from your strategic initiatives to the passion you bring in shaping the future. Your insights have truly highlighted the importance of innovation, leadership, and resilience. We are so grateful to have you had with us today. To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of FaceTime with Leaders. We hope you're leaving with a renewed sense of inspiration and purpose. Stay engaged, keep striving for greatness, and until next time, stay well and keep leading. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.